Consider the fanaticism of the establishment media. If metal is apolitical, it is supporting fascism. If you are not with us, you are against us. These people deal in absolutes. Also, the writer states metal has always had a healthy leftist streak. Thus, if it is on one side of politics, it is healthy. If it is on the other, it is unhealthy. This statement, however, is false. Heavy metal bands did not oppose Thatcher or Reagan in the 1980s. There were opinions on issues on one side or the other, but bands did not support one ideology or urge their fans to vote for or vote against any candidate. As a matter of fact, even rock bands during the most political time in the late 60s did not openly support one side or the other and did not attempt to impose opinions or commit brainwash. Even those that were on the left did not use the word left and did not say vote against Nixon. They knew that either it was not their place or they feared they would lose fans. The vague social and political commentary matched the music, but they had no dogmatic beliefs. Often they sounded mixed up, which means they were honest. They considered different aspects or views, but obviously, if one is not definite as to what he wants, he cannot tell other people to want the same. Their lack of definite or dogmatic views saved them from becoming fanatic political hacks who try to brainwash their fans. This is the opposite of what is seen with many musicians now. The fact that they now openly support their ideology, now that they have the media on their side, does not attest to their integrity. The propaganda is that metal or rock in general has an obligation to be on the left in order to be revolutionary. However, "won't get fooled again" does not refer to the conservative establishment. It does not mean people should not be fooled again by the right wing. It was a given that the right wing fooled people in the past. The song refers to the fact that people should not get fooled by the other side as well, not get fooled by the supposed modernists or the left. Joining the left was not an act of revolution. It was abandoning blind obedience to the right and espousing blind obedience to the left. The very fact that today pop stars are far more to the left than the 60s musicians shows how ridiculous the situation is. Either they are so much more enlightened or they are ridiculous. Woke multiculturalists demand that heavy metal follow not the 60s musicians but the pop celebrities. But if one believes in the 60s values, then they would have to judge the dogmas supported by the super-rich establishment pop stars as ridiculous, especially the dogma of politically correct censorship. Supposedly, heavy metal means support for anti-capitalism. You couldn't get an opinion like this even in the Soviet Union. The true intent is obvious and even admitted. It is to increase the power of the left. Heavy metal must be dominated and turned into a tool of the left. The other issue with determining the political position of heavy metal is that terms such as right or left are meaningless without a definition of those terms, and after the year 2000, those definitions changed a lot, so they moved very much to the left. So yes, in 1980s terms, the average metalhead could have been considered on cultural issues to be non-conservative, meaning either on the left, center, or among liberal or libertarian right-wingers. But the terms have changed, so leftists today consider those people who still hold the old center-left views to be right-wingers or among the hard right. Most leftists in the 80s did not support open borders or biological boys who are transgender girls using the girls' school showers. But if someone holds the same views today, he is called a right-wing extremist by the New Left and much of the establishment. Thus, yes, metalheads may have been somewhat to the left in the 1980s, but they never changed. Others changed. In 1980s terminology, metalheads are still somewhat to the left or liberal or libertarian right culturally. Even when they admit that there is far less sexism and far less harassment of women at heavy metal concerts and clubs because metal fans are there for the music and not to pick up women, while instead there's much more harassment by mainstream and pop music fans at their venues, there is still the view that something must be done about metal. Because this is the actual intention of ideologues. They must invent a problem in order to justify their salary and justify their activism, because if no action needs to be taken, there is no need for activism. If there is no problem, then they, as sociologists, psychologists, experts, are not needed in society as they have nothing to offer. But if their desire is to change, always change things, because that makes them feel important and superior, then they must pretend there is a problem. Moreover, metal, like everything, is to be used as a tool for the purposes of the ideologues, here to attack the patriarchy. Consider a study claiming that heavy metal must change in order to be more inclusive. One can understand what kind of person wrote it by the fact that the author admits to have had leftist radical parents and that he uses terms such as heteronormative, normalization of the gender order, sexism, racism, and finds it offensive to use the term packy shop. Who would find it offensive to say Irish bar? Would any normal person find it offensive to say Irish bar? Supposedly, heavy metal is a bit racist and sexist. Something appears racist and sexist simply because the left defines normal human behavior as racist and sexist. Exploring race, nation, place, and masculinity in heavy metal. People cannot simply enjoy something like a form of music. Instead, this music has to be explored, examined, studied, dissected by Marxist academics in social sciences, and they will decree what we may or may not enjoy. Liking metal and being sympathetic to many of its themes, ideologies, and mythotypes, even if some of them need to be overturned for the good and the future of metal. Heavy metal or anything else may be allowed to exist as long as Marxist academics say they permit it. It may be permitted to exist as long as it stops being what it is and becomes something else, but it may keep the same name. And this is not for the good of cultural Marxism, but supposedly for the good of heavy metal. Among the references, one finds Gramsci, a darling of cultural Marxists. Metal is being co-opted by the mainstream. Co-opted by the mainstream? The mainstream is multicultural leftist, the big media, Hollywood, pop music, etc. The danger of being co-opted is being co-opted by the left. Donald Trump, angry white men. How these forms of metal might work to reimagine masculinity, race, nation, and class in an intersectional way. Hegemonic masculinity, nationalism. Metal has been and is a safe place for queers and others seeking to challenge heteronormativity. The inclusion of non-heterosexual, non-cis metalheads rejects sexism and homophobia. Being gay or being trans is no longer seen as something unusual. Serving the top 50 selling bands, there's not a single song in favor of racism or sexism or homophobia. Blacks were not excluded. Blacks simply preferred different music. So, how can heavy metal fans reject sexism and homophobia if they never were sexist or homophobic to begin with? The answer is, the intention of these leftist ideologues is not to make metal songs stop supporting racism, this never existed, but to make metal bands start singing about anti-racism, anti-sexism, and have pro-trans songs. This means changing having fun with obeying an obligation. Thou shalt not be racist. Accepting the leftist dogma that today's society actually is racist, sexist, and homophobic, which means that it is mainly white heterosexual men who are the bad ones, meaning the metal fans themselves, feeling guilty for being white heterosexual men. Rejecting racism, etc., means declaring yourself guilty of a crime you have not committed and propagandizing through your music that you are guilty. It means writing songs in favor of transgender bathrooms and school showers, against offensive Halloween costumes, in favor of open borders, especially against Trump, perhaps even in favor of a war against Syria, because this is what the establishment left wants. The populist government in Hungary has announced it is banning gender studies because it is pseudoscience. There is no scientific evidence that men are wired differently to women in any way. There are differences, and heavy metal itself proves it. Far more men are attracted to heavy metal than women. The reason more men and only few women are interested in heavy metal is the same reason why many boys and only few girls are interested in toy guns. There is a genetic predisposition, although the actual outcome depends on every individual's temperament. Far more boys are attracted to toy guns, war or violence in games or films, etc. This means there is a difference by birth in preferences. There are differences. It is not absolute, but it is very large, and it is not a product of social influence, but innate. So what is the point? Making half the metal musicians be women? Like the failed attempts to make half the scientists, astronomers, and engineers women? Like the desperate attempt to increase the percentage of black ice hockey players? Because if blacks do not choose to become professional ice hockey players, we must convince them to do so. Consider the attempt to make half the plumbers women. The reason open-minded people did not like the conservative establishment was that the establishment was trying to change human nature. It is human nature to disagree, criticize, ridicule, be aggressive and noisy. Thus, the establishment's attempt to keep people in check, obedient, and polite was oppression. The open-minded idea was to retain or go back to the original essence of human nature. Then the cultural left came and attempted to change human nature again. Critical race theory, radical feminism, Gramscian Marxism, lyrical and symbolic mythotopes, warriors, roots and nations, standing firm and being true in the face of change. Viking metal, pagan heathen culture, are based on hegemonic masculinity, nationalism that is romantic and conservative. The Viking metal of Bathory conforms to the mainstream. This would be true if the mainstream was truly conservative, but it is clear that the mainstream is leftist internationalist. Good time music with fun lyrics, there is a strong normalization of hegemonic masculinity, whiteness, and nation. When you're having fun, be careful so you don't accidentally normalize masculinity, whiteness, and nation. Iron Maiden normalizes hegemonic masculinity and instrumental whiteness. Manowar construct hypermasculinity and pride, which serves to exclude others. Singing about your past and your nation is bad because it excludes others who feel they cannot participate. Has anyone thought that when blacks sing in rap songs about blacks and the ghetto, they are excluding white people who cannot participate? Rap is not inclusive, but many whites listen to it anyway without demanding changes to the lyrics. The disabled cannot play sports. Not everything can be inclusive, yet many disabled people choose to watch sports. The transgender should not try to fit in with a heavy metal crowd, but heavy metal music and its fans must change to fit in with a transgender. Heavy metal songs should not be about the feelings of soldiers, either their fears or passion, but about the hurt feelings of feminists and the transgender. But while heavy metal songs about hurt feelings are ridiculous, songs about actual rape victims, for example, would make sense. But this would be moralizing and offering compassion, and heavy metal typically does not do this. There are songs condemning war, but they do not explore the hurt feelings of the victims. It is more likely to hear songs exploring the mental state of serial killers or war criminals than the feelings of their victims. And often, these criminals are not explicitly condemned in the lyrics. There is no need for this. Any logical person can understand that the songwriter, being a normal human being, simply explores and does not support criminal activity. If some people do not like these lyrics, they can listen to other kinds of music, just as they do not watch slasher horror films but prefer love stories. Imagine love story fans demanding horror films be less violent so they can watch them too, or horror fans demanding that love stories also include horror scenes so they can watch them too, or lazy people demanding that athletes train less hard and start running slower so they too can take part in sports without having to train so hard. Minorities complaining about being marginalized in heavy metal is preposterous. Heavy metal fans were the ones marginalized and discriminated against because of their hair, clothes, or music. It was less likely for a heavy metal fan to be hired for a job at a place where people usually dressed normally. Heavy metal songs were not chosen for big Hollywood films. Yet heavy metal fans did not complain because they found this normal. They did not demand that lawyers in court start wearing heavy metal t-shirts or that movies use heavy metal songs that were inappropriate for the subject matter. Thus, if the interests of feminists and the transgender are not represented in heavy metal lyrics, and thus they feel marginalized, they have to accept this as normal. An old person can go to a football match, but he knows that his daily concerns, his blood pressure and diabetes, are not the concern of the athletes and not the subject matter of the match. A Muslim can go to a Christian church, but he will not hear any praise for his religion. There were heavy metal lyrics about the problems teenagers faced, but there were no songs about the problems parents and teachers faced because of teenagers who behave badly. Such subjects were beyond the scope of this music. The problems of teachers or feminists were not the concern of the heavy metal crowd. Once at a rap concert, the performer asked a girl from the audience to come up on the stage and sing with him. When she sang the so-called N-word, a lyric in his song, he stopped and condemned her for using that word because as a white person she did not have the right to say it. Only blacks like himself have the right to use that word continuously in their songs.
One single word, though.
Oh, I'm sorry. Did I do it?
Yeah, you did it.
I'm so sorry. Oh my God.
Should she stay up here, y'all?
No, please keep me up here. I got you. I'll try my hardest. I'm used to singing it like a rodent.
You sure?
I swear.
You got it?
I promise. Sorry about that.
Knowing the lyrics that were to follow, he put her on the stage intentionally to ridicule her, and then the rest of the audience started booing her, and the fans condemned her on social media. These were the same fans who had been singing the N-word just a few seconds earlier. This is what one can expect from establishment music. This is the kind of human beings its rich performers and fans are. You would not see this in metal. No musician would dare say he can do what his fans cannot do. No fan would support such a performer instead of another fan. But the people who say it is right to separate fans by their skin color are the ones saying metal is supposedly not inclusive. So this gave rise to the question, can white people sing this word? Here too, as with Halloween costumes, we have to consult left-wing university professors of sorts to tell us what we are allowed to do. The verdict is, whites should stay silent, and moreover, white people have a role in hip-hop, but it is overwhelmingly a passive one. To listen, to accept being criticized, to be the butt of a joke, to be the target of aggression, and to learn to be obedient. This is where metal differs and why obedience would mean the end. It means being incorporated into the establishment. And yes, this is the establishment. This is why the Pulitzer Prize in music, which was always given only to American classical or symphonic or jazz musicians, was for the first time ridiculously given to a rap album by this specific entertainer, and not to a metal album whose music was far superior in quality, and not even to any of the musicians at the forefront of music. Not once all these years. Instead, the prize had to enforce conformity to the multicultural social justice dogma and honor those artists who are in agreement. More leftist university professors may claim such music is against conformity and speaks about ghetto life and racial injustice, and while these super-rich entertainers may live an adventurous life, their lives have nothing to do with poverty in the ghettos or any kind of injustice. At least when you're singing about fantasy, you're not lying to your audience, pretending to understand poverty and injustice. There is nothing anti-conformist in music that is in full agreement with the multicultural social justice establishment in media, academia, and politics. Obedience to the establishment means you accept being a victim of criticism and aggression by people who live in these mansions, and accept being schooled by ideologues who make a good salary by telling you to be obedient. Heavy metal cannot be shamed by anyone considered to be progressive, educated about politics and social issues. Consider The Clash, a darling of the media. This band's singer, once at a festival, during an incoherent rant, tried to make a crowd of hundreds of thousands of people believe they should be ashamed of themselves if they wish to enjoy themselves that night.
Right then, here we are, in the capital of the decadent US of A. I know the human race is supposed to get down on its knees in front of all this new technology and kiss the microchip circuits. It doesn't impress me over much when there ain't nothing but a you buy, you make, you buy, you die. That's the motto of America. And if there's anything going to be in the future, it's got to be from all parts of everything, not just one white way down the middle of the road. So if anybody out there ever grows up, I suppose, you don't want to hear me going about this and that.
The band claimed they cannot be sold after being paid nearly $2 million in today's money for one concert. The following night, they got their answer from a man who took them as seriously as they deserved to be taken, meaning not at all.
I want to take this time to say that this is real whiskey here. The only people who put iced tea in Jack Daniels bottles is the Clash, baby!
A woman can be sent to prison for 3 years for saying a man cannot be a mother or a lesbian. Anthropologists should not identify million-year-old skeletons as male or female, because this is offensive to the transgender. Mothers are officially called birthing people because some people are offended by the word mother, speaking on behalf of other people who are under 1% of the population. Some university students, in order to be allowed to graduate, must complete 4 diversity courses. Male university students on a date must ask for permission and see enthusiastic consent from the girl before attempting to kiss her. Otherwise, this counts as sexual assault. On the next date, he must seek again permission. And on every date, every time, even in marriage. The princes who kiss girls in fairy tales are sex offenders and promote sexual violence. And also, airports are racist, pollution is racist, obesity is racist, eating red meat is racist and sexist. Of course, these people would consider heavy metal to be racist, sexist, and homophobic because they consider everything to be racist, sexist, and homophobic. Even if one believes that these people actually speak and act the way they demand other people do, that they ask for permission from their spouse before a kiss, or if one believes the unbelievable, that these people want diversity so much that these white professors and journalists are actually willing to sacrifice their own careers and resign from their highly paid jobs so that more black people can get these jobs, it is still a fact that very few people are convinced by such ideas. And there is no reason to obey a fanatic ideological minority, even if it has the support of big business and the media owned by the super rich, but especially because it has the support of the super rich and their media. If the idea in metal was that people have the right to live as they wish and not be oppressed by parents, teachers, religion, and social views, then obviously they should not accept oppression by ideologues in media, academia, and politics. Perhaps metal is better precisely because it appeared in the 1980s. If now people in high positions are promoting the most irrational beliefs, obviously a return to the sanity and logic of the past is preferable, especially if it is accompanied by a healthy dose of offensiveness, irreverence, and humor. Thus, there is little that can be found to be a better cure for the modern malaise than heavy metal.